So, I don't know, about a year ago or so, my mum asked me to make her organizer for her sewing threads. And so I just made this grid light pattern. And the way I did this is I got some 3mm plywood sheet, and I just cut it up into strips of 8 centimeters high, and then cut that into two different length segments, and then using the table saw I cut slots out of each piece, and then I flipped one piece 90 degrees and just overlaid them on top of each other to create that grid pattern. So since Christmas was just 2 weeks away, I thought I'd finally finish this project and give it as a present to my mum. And I started off with a pine panel to create the external shell for this grid I already made. And to do this, I just first made some rough cuts and then cut these to final dimensions, all with the table saw. And then here are the 4 pieces cut to length. And then for the edges, I'm going to do, I don't know what you call it, like a lap joint and a finger joint. So like a lap finger joint, I guess. It'll become clearer as later on in the video. So I started off by just roughly marking where I'm going to cut. And then to make sure my cut was at the right distance into the piece of material, instead of measuring it out, I just simply butted it up against another piece of stock material. And then you'll also notice I put a piece of plywood against the fence. And this is just to make sure that the wood didn't bind when it was going through the blade, because this could cause kickbacks. And then to create the dado, I just ran the material through the table saw blade multiple times, and then went side to side just to clean out the cut. And then this is for the finger joint of it. So I've got the lap, and I just mark out the area that needs to be cut on one piece, cut that out on the table saw. And then now I've hugged out one side, I'm creating the pin, I think it's called, on the other side. And I marked out what each piece is, just to make sure I get the same joint each time, so it's a perfect fit. And now I've got these reference marks, I can just carry on the markings to the top plane of my workpiece using a tri-square, and then just cut it out on the table saw. Now, as I'm looking at here doing this voiceover, I probably should have used a stop block, because that just ensures you get the exact same cut every time for each piece. Now, if we just pause it here, you can see I made an error when I was making those pins. I didn't take into account the fact that it was a lap and a finger joint, so the pins are just basically the double the length that they need to be. And so now, the grid pattern that I made a year ago was just slightly too long to fit out. But in keeping with my other video on having failures in projects, I just took a step back, and it actually wasn't that big of a failure. In fact, to be honest, it's probably a good thing. I'll explain at the end. And I just marked it out and then just sanded the edge of the grid down until it fit. And you can see there, it fit perfectly after I'd sanded it. And now I'm just cutting a groove for the bottom panel. And then for the back panel I used 5mm plywood, and again the masking tape to stop tear out. So as you can see here, the edge of the plywood grid I made a year ago is chipped out, splintered, it's cracked, because it's just been knocking about, it's been in cupboards, it's been under workbenches and stuff. So I decided I'll clean it up and I'd put on some iron-on edge banding. So I just cut my thick edge banding down into much thinner strips, and then just used a standard clothes iron to iron it into place. And then I came back with just a razor blade to cut them to the correct thickness. And now for the smaller in-between pieces, I carried out a similar process. I cut a piece of edge banding, marked where I needed to cut it with the blade, and then just simply cut off the end with the razor blade so it's the right length, and then iron this into place. And then again, with the razor blade, I just cut it to the correct thickness. And then I just came back with some 120 grit sandpaper to blend the edge bindings into the plywood. And now that the frame was done, I could move on to the top section of the sewing organizer. And to do this, I just got a scrap piece of perspex, and I needed to cut a groove for this to slide into. And the purpose of this perspex is to have on the top to stop the threads from falling out as it gets moved about. But again, on the table, so I cut out a groove for this. You can see there it goes all the way around, and then I wanted this piece of perspex to roll in and out, so I needed to cut one piece short. So I just marked the edge of the rabbit, the cut out, on this end piece, and then just cut this out again on table saw. And now I've got one edge that's slightly lower so that the perspex piece can roll easily in and out. And then I'm moving on to the glue up. So just before I did the glue up, I sanded the inside edges because this is the last chance I'd have to access them. And now you may have noticed that I didn't cut the perspex to size previously, and this because I didn't have the right blade at the time. But I went out and bought one, and the specific blade you need, I'll post a video in the description explaining why you need this blade for cutting the acrylic. And then I just put the piece of perspex against the organizer and used a permanent marker to give me a marking, and then a tri-square to give me some straight edges. And then I cut along these lines with the jigsaw, and as you can see, I put a wooden block in place to ensure that my cut was straight and of a consistent thickness. And now a really good tip for removing permanent marker marks is just rub some Brasso onto it. It just gets rid of them completely. And then once this was done, I got some 600 grit sandpaper just to smooth up the edges. I rubbed all the edges and I rounded the corners as well, just so you didn't cut yourself on it. And as you can see here, it easily slid in and out, and it was a good fit. And now I need to move on to clean up the edge of the joint, because if you remember, I accidentally cut them long. So to do this, I cut them with the table saw using the crosscut sled. And then I used this flat sander to just get the joints fluff, and used a random orbital sander to just smooth off the rest of the external edges, for instance removing the markings I made previously. And then just a tiny bit of hand sanding to soften the edges. And then I used some Ronseal wood filler to just clear up all the tiny little gaps in the joints. And then I just simply sanded away the wood filler once it dried with some sandpaper. And then I thought the edge of it just looks a bit clunky, so I decided to create a shadow line on the router. And then I gave a final sanding with some 400 grit to create a really smooth surface. And then I finished it using some finishing oil, which just helps to seal the wood, protect it from bumps, and also to bring out the gain. And then for the inside of each piece, I used a paintbrush. It was easier to get into all the corners. And then I simply just put all the different sewing threads in, and the project was done. And when I mentioned before about why sanding down the two pieces on each end was actually a benefit, and this is because it allowed me to put the smaller bits of threads in. So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and if you've got any criticisms, leave a comment below.